Christmas is here. We are just a handful of days from December 25th. And the parties and the dinners and the get-togethers and the devotionals and the programs are in full swing. And I try not to roll my eyes, and then I'm always thankful. I'm always thankful that my wife and my daughter-in-laws have put together a wonderful lead up to that day. Now, there are so many legitimate objections to the way the season has evolved around materialism and commercialism, and bah humbug is something that we probably all want to say, or maybe we've heard ourselves say it. But boy, when it gets right down to it, for the Wadsworths at least, the joy and rejoicing always outweighs the bah humbug. Now, speaking of bah humbug, Kelly and I love Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and we always watch several. So far this year, we've watched 6 versions of A Christmas Carol. George C. Scott and Patrick Stewart, and then, thanks to my friend Nick Turner, I watched one with Alistair Sims, an old one. And there's one produced by a little fledgling network called Chicken Soup for the Soul, maybe one of my favorite musical renditions. And every year I think about Scrooge, and I watch Scrooge, and I feel bad for Scrooge, and then I watch the change. Well, I've thought a couple of new thoughts this year, inspired by a guy named Garrett Gong, whom I listened to speak at a devotional, a couple weeks ago. And his family also loves and uses and learns from Charles Dickens' masterwork that in so many ways began to define Christmas in the West. And by the way, it's not Dickens' fault if our materialism has taken it to an unhealthy extent with the gifting, but I digress. So Scrooge. He pointed out that Scrooge has become iconic with tight-fisted, hard-bitten, closed as an oyster capitalism. And yeah, that's what Scrooge has come to symbolize. And then he sort of brought forward for me and for Kelly what we've been doing instinctively and maybe not enough, and that is recognizing the truly iconic aspects of Scrooge, and that is what he became, the new creature, the reborn Scrooge. And so watching it with those eyes this year, I realized that's what we look forward to, with the ghosts and Marley and forging a chain, and we look forward to the redemption. And by the way, redemption is what the story of Christmas is about. I mean, it is Jesus Christ, for whom the angels sang and whom they announced and who the shepherds found. That's where redemption comes from. But there are a couple of other characters in A Christmas Carol that are bigger for me this year. I've overlooked Bob Cratchit. He's a tragic figure, but he's more than tragic. He's his own giant. Bob had nothing. 15 bob a week, just a little money. I don't know what that was. For you guys in Britain, I don't know what that was then, but I know it wasn't much. And I should have learned from Bob Cratchit as a young dad, as a young father, when there wasn't enough money, and my wife wisely took the bit in her teeth, as she seldom did, and sort of initiated and enforced a proper Christmas. I wish I would have been more like Cratchit, coming home knowing that we couldn't quite afford what we were going to do, but that, doggone it, it would be a bigger loss to waste the moment. And then think of Cratchit working for Scrooge, working with the nose on the grindstone in the cold, abused. And yet he never reviled. Maybe he couldn't, but he didn't. And then he even defended Scrooge to his own bride, who knew how badly oppressed her good man was. He defended Scrooge right there in the middle of his own family, and it lifted their whole party. Think of that. I'm going to learn from Cratchit. I wish I would have learned earlier. And then the last one I want to mention is Fred. Nephew Fred. If anybody would have ever said to me some of the things Scrooge said to his nephew about his wife, about his darling wife and the folly of love, Scrooge would have had a big fat black eye. And instead, Fred just continued to invite him year after year and taught us in his soliloquy about Christmas, and though it never gave him another scrap of silver in his pocket, he received good from it. I admire Fred. I admire Bob. And I just admire Scrooge. But those admirations are small compared to what the gift of faith can cause us to feel for the Savior at this time of the year, if we're open to it and if we recognize it. So to wrap this up, whether or not the gift of faith means anything at all to you, the wonderful story that Charles Dickens left for us and the way he wrapped it up should mean something to all of us. And he wrapped it up something like this, that Ebenezer Scrooge was better than his word, and he became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the good old city ever knew. And it was always said of Ebenezer Scrooge that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive had the knowledge. May that be said of us. May that be said of us regardless of what our motivation is. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and God bless us, everyone.